Pinball 1973 is a novel by Haruki Murakami. I believe it was his second novel, and I recently finished it, and after some time of putting it off, but because I keep going back to that with certain authors where I'll read a good chunk of them, and I'll be like, it's not that I don't love them at all, it's like quite the opposite, and then I'll suddenly be reinvested in them, but I'll just kind of focus on another, either trend or type of author that shows up, and I'll be like, darn, I'm gonna, read their stuff too, so I'll like pick at them, and then I'm sure a bunch of people do this too, but then I'll like go back. So I went back with Pinball 1973, and it is, it's his second novel. It came out in about 1980, I think, in Japan. Later, wasn't until 85, I think, that it came out in English. So yeah, Murakami is an interesting writer. I would definitely put him on my, as a personal favorite. And it is about a young man. It's a similar type of device that he uses in a lot of his novels, where it's like a first-person narrator, and it's like you don't know how much of this is, like a self-insert, or if any at all. And it's kind of a similar thing that he uses in A Wild Sheep Chase. And in fact, this is actually the second or third trilogy of The Rat, because there's Hear the Wind Sing, I think, which is his very first novel. And made me a little bit feel bad about hearing how he started out writing at 29 or 30 when he first published his novel. Not to say that he wasn't, trying out stuff before that, but it kind of eases the mind a little bit, thinking that just because you don't have your life completely figured out and like know definitively what you want to do at a young age, like a very young, precocious age, and like Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein at like the age of 21 or something. So, but yeah, it's to go back on to focus here, it's using that similar narrative device, first person, but you kind of get a good clue into like what the other characters are thinking as well, I think. Or is it, why am I second guessing if it could be third person? But either way, it does delve a lot into the characters of the other mind, like the rat, who I find really interesting. So it's this unnamed main character. It focuses on him and his obsession with a pinball machine. Yeah, it's just that simple. Pinball 1973, and he's mid-20, 24, I think, and he's basically works as a freelance translator, and his motto is, and the long and short of it, I think, is just if it can be translated, we can do it. Like we'll find anything. You have to give us anything, translate. I'm not sure how much of that was hyperbolic, but I thought it was kind of funny. So he's working on that, and he spends his free time a lot hanging out at different bars and clubs or arcade areas where he is fixated on this pinball machine and on the idea of the pinball machine. And he goes back, and there's this kind of simultaneous history going on where he's like divulging on when it was founded, and like early models of it. Like Raymond Maloney, I think, comes up and he says that he was the original one that founded it in like 1943, and then 30 years later it's like 1973, and he's like saying like, now me, I'm coming into this like as this pinball enthusiast, and he's basically trying to find which gets more, this plot point becomes more pertinent later on in the novel. This, I think it's called like the Spaceship Trilogy, or the trilogy Space, or is it Space something, I think. And he's there's these two twins, or I should just say pair of twins, it's like redundant, but these twins that show up, and they randomly go into his house, or they just show up and inexplicably just somehow, he doesn't question the odd nature of it. And I like how it starts out kind of when he's like, oh, they just showed up in my house, and well, they must have come from Saturn or something, or he kind of, it's like magic realism. I like that element, which shows up in his novels a lot too, or things like the Sheep Man, or Kafka on the Shore with Nagatu having speaking to cats. It's kind of this ridiculous thing, but it's treated as if it's real, just kind of mundane. So he treats these two strangers in his house like identical twins. They're just like, it's completely normal, commonplace, and basically treats them and says, hey, make yourself at home, and and then has like, I guess, a romantic type of relations with it, and then in order to differentiate, I thought this was pretty funny. Like he puts like, well, I'll put you guys can have 2 turtleneck sweaters, and then this one can have like your name, and this one can have a letter, or like a letter on them to kind of signify. And I thought that was kind of funny. And they kind of quip in with like interesting. They kind of remind me a little bit of a Kafka-esque type of thing too, like kind of Kafka light, I think, because like the assistants in the castle, for example, who show up and they just kind of react to things, and they don't really necessarily add to the storyline, but like it's you just find it funny. But anyway, so he goes, and there's a long thing where he I don't know if you call this a diversion, but like I thought it was pretty funny as well, or kind of sad and funny. But this, when he's talking about like his switchboard, and he switchboard ends up going dead, I think, in his house, and then he calls up this guy to take care of it, and then he actually holds a little funeral for it, and and then there's like certain things, like he has certain rituals with the twins where he like takes them and across the golf course, and they catch stray golf balls, and they kind of so yeah. Then there's also the rat too, and who he visits and he's kind of a friend with, and he confides a lot with. And then there's the rat is basically kind of at a weird place in his life. He's about the same age as the main character, and he's trying to quit alcohol, and they both kind of like play pinball together, I believe. And there's also this ex-girlfriend of the main character, who Nakio, I think her name was, who committed suicide earlier in the novel, and he alludes to and talks to a lot too, or talks about. And yeah, by the end of the novel, it's like it's just kind of like a kind of series of like kind of odd happenings. Like it's not like a huge like linear type of epic novel, but it's, I think, it's like about probably the same size as like his other Hear the Wind Sing, or they're not. Wild Sheep Chase, I think, is like a little bit of a packed novel, I think, but his earlier ones were pretty not that long at all. I think novella length, but I think that's like a adequate length to convey Murakami's, his leanings, his literary, his kind of like almost crystal clean type of prose, where he's just like, and then this happened, and then that happened. Like it's kind of almost disaffected, but he's like, but it's not without beauty as well. It's not like an aesthetic understanding of like what's the poet, the poetic, and it's not that far away from, just because he's explaining it in that way, but in the sense that he's almost describing it as if it's like mundane or commonplace, but it's like clearly there's something much deeper happening in between the lines, which is why Murakami is so great, in my opinion. So yeah, Pinball 1973. Oh, there's also one part of it. He this guy who's an actual pinball expert that he gets in touch with later in the novel, that who helps him out in his quest to find this pinball machine. And he's like, yeah, did you go to get a degree in this? And he's like, actually, I have got a degree in it. So I thought that was fun, like the fact that this person too is like, shares his kind of obsession, itty fix with it. So yeah, Pinball 1973 by Haruki Murakami. Thank you for watching.